I'm not the biggest fan of confrontation. I ask a lot of questions, just not out loud. This is AMI Audiobook Review, the weekly podcast where we chat all things audiobooks, and I'm your host, Ramya Amathan. Welcome to 2023. There are a lot of audiobook conversations to be had, and the quote that we picked for the intro of this episode, the first one of the year, is from Friends, Lovers, and the Big Terrible Thing by Matthew Perry. And it really does set the tone, or at least ask the questions that we're going to be getting into today. A lot of what is available to us are stories written and told to us by the people who wrote the stories. And really, these memoirs, autobiographies, are journals, diaries, truths, and all kinds of maybe even secrets from people. And we get to know a little more of them if we take these as authentic stories, that is. And we're going to get into some of the questions as to why we pick up celebrity memoirs. What are the intentions behind us wanting to get to know these people? Matthew Perry, who plays Chandler Bing in Friends, is someone who has recently come out with a lot of the behind the scenes as to what was going on with him as he shot the seasons of Friends through the series, and of course all the other movies and things that he's taken part in. So although it was more than a decade ago that he was going through some of the bigger influential parts of his life as it pertains to his use of drugs and going through rehab and all these other things, he comes out with these stories now with what he wants to say about those experiences and in the form of a memoir. And it just sparks the question, why? Why do we want to know? How is he telling these stories, and how does this impact the way that we want to hear them? And do we hear them the way that they're intended to be told by the writer? We're going to get into all that a little later on in the show, but first, as we always do, let's take a glance at the CELA homepage. This is from the Center for Equitable Library Access, which you can visit at celalibrary.ca. And the three featured titles that are up there and you can still check out are Blackwater Falls by Azma Zihanet Khan. This is a police procedural fiction. Also, Artificial Divide by Robert Kinjit. This is an anthologies category. And the last one up there for the three featured titles is Love from Mecca to Medina by S.K. Ali. This is categorized as a contemporary romance and family stories. In just a second, we're going to check in with Karen McKay and Theresa Power from the Center for Equitable Library Access to talk more about these influencers' lives in the form of memoirs. This is AMI Audiobook Review. This is AMI Audiobook Review, the weekly podcast where we chat all things audiobooks. And it is our first podcast of 2023. And as it turns out, it's also the first episode of 2023 with our friends from the Center for Equitable Library Access. This check-in we have at the start of every month, and we have it with Theresa Power and Karen McKay. Theresa is the Content and Access Librarian at CELA, and Karen is the Communications Manager. So welcome. Well, of course, welcome back, but welcome to both of you to the new year.
Thank you for still having us.
Oh my goodness, of course. You know, the no formal renewal needed. It was just like, of course you're coming back. So I'm curious because, of course, both of you are avid readers. Any books that you're looking forward to in 2023? Anything that you've been anticipating or just can't wait to indulge in, keeping track of? I haven't myself done any of this, and I usually get surprised when when I found out that someone's dropped their book. So that's my side of it. How about you?
I think I have one in January that I'm interested in reading, actually, and it's a memoir by one of the Duggar kids, and I don't know if people are familiar with their show. They had a long-standing show on TLC called, I think it was 19 Kids and Counting at first, and then it was 20
Right.
Kids and Counting, and then it was 21 Kids and Counting. Yeah, just about their experience being in that family, because like certainly on TV, you got a very polished kind of perception of what the family is like. And it seems like everyone is, happy, I
Mm-hmm.
suppose. Um, but then I don't know, you kind of wonder, like, in 21 Kids, is there not that kid who just likes wearing black and loves, I don't know, like metal music or
Doesn't fit the
something, like,
mold
yeah,
or
like doesn't
yeah.
fit the mold or whatever. And I mean, certainly a lot has come out about the family in the past few years, very negative things about the family. So, it's just interesting to kind of read the behind the scenes, how I actually felt, and how I'm doing. I believe she's left the family and the family traditions behind. So yeah, I think it'll be interesting to read all about that.
Okay. Well, that's interesting. And I have, like, I only know of the show, and that's pretty much all it. I have not kept a track of any of the kids. So I'm curious about how many people. And I think, like the Kardashians, like all these other kind of reality TV examples, people are probably super psyched, like
Hmm.
you,
Yeah.
to hear more. All right. But this is a great segue into our chat today because Karen and Theresa, you're here to talk a little bit about celebrity memoirs. And we have chatted about celebrity memoirs in different contexts here on the show, especially when some things come out or things that we've enjoyed reading, people we've enjoyed reading about. But maybe we can go down a list of things that stand out to us, books, people, why we chose them, why we haven't read about them, maybe choose not to. So let's start there. Either something that you can think about that's coming up for you or that the world is anticipating, or something you've already read. Karen?
So I think the one that's sort of on top of mind for everyone is Prince Harry's memoir, Spare, which is coming out just in a few weeks now.
Yep.
And given all of the media surrounding the Netflix documentary and the situation with the family, I think this one is highly anticipated. It was interesting. I was just checking out Goodreads, and the conversation's already happening over there, even though the book's not been published. And I don't think there's ARCs available. Like, I don't think that they've started to send out pre-publication copies yet. And so, people are either completely invested in this story and this narrative, or they are completely against knowing anything about it and just want it all to go away. So it's interesting to me what that might look like in terms of book conversations around this particular book.
Are either of you, Theresa or Karen, looking forward to it yourselves?
I was just talking about this actually, and I think that my initial reaction was like, "Oh no!" Like, I don't think that I can. I don't think I could read it. And yet, I've watched at least the first half of the Netflix documentary series, and um, I've kind of like grown up with them, knowing about them, because I'm in similar in age to them. I feel like a tiny bit invested as well. So I feel like I've kind of gotten this far. And I will probably read it, although
You'll keep going.
I really need to boost myself up. I was saying to my colleagues, like, I had to do that for watching the first half of the Netflix series. Like, I was literally there for days being like, Teresa, you can do this. Like, you can watch it. It's
Wow.
going to be okay. Like, it's really going to be okay. Because you don't know. Like, I think that there was like a lot of anticipation for the Netflix thing, and there's a lot of anticipation for the book as well. On like, what is he going to say? So there's definitely a lot of build up, and I feel like a little bit of anxiety around consuming things about them and about the royal family as well.
Yeah, and I think with the royal family, it's fair to say, and I'm not a royal watcher, I don't put myself in this category, but I think it's fair to say that there's been so many conversations throughout the decades that haven't been said by the royals. So because of that factor alone, they could be talking about anything, and all of it will be news. So from the interview that Harry and Meghan had with Oprah Winfrey, to the Netflix special you're talking about, to anything at all, feels like some kind of development tea, whatever, because we don't know much. There's been so much left off the table
It's
with the royals.
it's basically like they're doing in a short time what the royal family strives to not do for
Yep,
their entire existence, which is
outing them,
talking
kind of.
about the inner, like the inner sanctum, the workings of what goes on behind the scenes, right? And
Yep.
they're very open to talking about that. And there's like a bit of a cringeworthy kind of factor to it, but then there's also like there is that factor of like of never really knowing, and kind of being sort of interested, like, ooh, this is our first chance of getting a
Mm-hmm.
glimpse into what it was like to be part of the royal family.
I think that's part of why I'm not sure that I'll read it. It feels a bit voyeuristic to me, and I don't know that I want to be part of somebody's, for lack of a better word, sort of therapy session. Like, I don't know that I need to know those things, or that I want to know those things, or that I think that they should take up the space that they're currently taking up in the public conversation when there's so many other things going on.
Right.
But I will admit to being curious, and I think I'm not a huge Meghan fan. Wasn't before she married Prince Harry, and I think that that part of the challenge between the royal family and the couple is that I think that they're just talking on different planes about different things. Literally, like there's cultural differences that are clearly coming into play here
Yes.
about all of the aspects of royalty and royal life and that sort of thing. I would be interested to hear from Harry, because I think he's probably done a lot of work around his own life experiences, and done a lot of thinking about race and bias, and he's got an interesting perspective. And if we get a chance to talk about the Bono book, I think that there's a similar kind of perspective from a place of privilege and a place of power, and how that gets utilized. But I don't know that I want to kind of peek behind the curtains that they're drawing open. And it feels like you're in the middle of a family fight.
You are,
that's
though.
not really where I want to be.
Yeah.
I kind of like wonder, and I think, Karen, what you say there is it being in the middle of a fight and it being voyeuristic. I just kind of wonder what the whole point of all of this is, because if you at least watch, like I said, I only watched really the first half of this documentary, but like there's really an investment in the two of them to tell their true story. Like whatever has happened in the past has just been the wrong story, the wrong narrative, and they're very invested in kind of correcting that narrative. And yet both of them, and I mean especially Harry for his entire life, has had a very terrible relationship with the media.
Mm-hmm.
And yet they're here engaging and looking to some sort of media to tell this story. And I guess I wonder what the point is, and also I'm just very curious about this investment in really wanting to tell their side of the story, what they say
Yeah.
that the truth is, when they could say, like, forget it, like the media is corrupt, and we know that we don't have a good relationship with them, and we've been fed to them. This is like things that he said. Forget about it. We know our story. We know what it was like. We have a great love story. That's what we think, and this is what we thought happened, and that's for us to know and forget about it.
Well, there's definitely the question of intention. But also for me, I think the reason why, and you mentioned this earlier, Theresa, like the age group and, who this really appeals to and why. And I think for me, it's because I'm curious about the cycle breaking, right? Obviously, this has gone on, like the royals and their reputation and their how celebrity they are has gone on for so long, and not all with the in a healthy way, right, with the media or other kinds of dynamics and relationships. So I'm curious about the cycle breaking and the intention behind it for Harry and Meghan, and a little bit of that torch passing, maybe. Like, this is just me throwing out offering ideas of why it might be, but that torch that's been passed on from Princess Diana, and what of her advocacy, if you will, that Harry is bringing to the table. So, and again, we have no clue, like both of you have mentioned this, we have no clue what the book is going to bring because there isn't much out there on it. So who knows what kinds of perspective Harry's going to bring to the table. But Karen, you mentioned Bono. So you take us there, like either the parallels that you were talking about potentially bringing up, or what about this book did you want to bring to the table?
So Bono's got a new book out. It's the first time that he's written a memoir. There's been lots written about his career, but it's his first sort of turn at the typewriter, so to speak. It's called Surrender, a Story in 40 Songs. 40 Songs, One Story. Sorry, let me get that right. And so each of the 40 chapters in the book are named after a U2 song. And it's I've been researching this a little bit. I haven't read it yet, but it's on my list. I think that the parallels between Harry and Bono are that they both come from a place of immense wealth and privilege, and the opportunity to make change because of that, and how they're going about that, and what the stories are that they're telling. As you said, we don't know what's going to be in Harry's book, but Bono's book touches certainly on his personal life, but there's a lot about his advocacy and his work to build bridges and to create opportunities for people who have had, fewer opportunities than he's had. We get a bit of an insight into how he was growing up in Ireland. One of his parents was Catholic, the other was Protestant, and he went to a non-denominational school. And I think that really shaped a lot of his work. There's a big chunk of the book apparently that deals with politics and religion in America. And I thought that was kind of an interesting place for him to take this book. Clearly it's to, I think, probably expand his potential audience. But he's a big enough star. I think folks would read it anyway. But I was kind of struck by some of the quotes that I'd read from the book, and just particularly in contrast with the situation with Meghan and Harry and what they're doing with their approach and their book and their power, and how publicly they're making their life versus, I had to Google whether Bono was married and had kids. I didn't remember that. So that's not a big part of his sort of public persona. He is, by the way, he's got 4 kids and he married a childhood sweetheart, which I think is lovely. But he's met with world leaders to talk about initiatives that he brings to the table, and he sort of built that himself, versus Harry's been sort of dropped into that kind of situation. So it's interesting to see how these two folks with similar kinds of level of privilege and power are using that in the world.
Now, that personal connection, right? Like because there's so much celebrity biographies, autobiographies, even just when something is narrated by the author themselves in the audiobook form, I'm always slightly curious to check it out just to see how they perform, But the big thing is, if I don't feel personally connected in some way to this person, artist, whoever, probably won't check out the book. And Bono is that for me. But the next person, Michelle Obama, I was very curious about checking her out because of all the kind of philanthropic work that she does for people. Have either of you read Michelle Obama's first or other books?
I have not. And again, since not, I don't know. I again, like I really like her as a person, and she stands for many great things. But I don't know for me if that translates enough into like really also wanting to read the books, plural.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I haven't read either of them, and I am probably would probably be more interested in reading Becoming, which I think is more memoir. I think The Light
Yes.
We Carry, which is her more recent one, sort of has a bit of a memoir crossover with self-help and life coach thing. And that, I have to say, kind of rubs me just a bit the wrong way. I don't want to be preached at.
Yeah.
Like the memoirs that I really love are ones of folks who don't come from a place of celebrity already, like Tara Westover, an educator, or Paul Calanthe in When Breath Becomes Air. Those sorts of like human first person, this is my life and these are my lessons kinds of stories that don't come from a place of trying to educate or to, I don't know what the
Mhm.
right word is, but those ones speak to me more than celebrity memoirs do. And so I don't know whether I'll read Michelle Obama's most recent one. I'll probably read it for, for work purposes, at least some of it, but I don't know that it's one I'll immerse myself in.
Do you feel, and I'm not sure how this is going to go, but do you feel it's fair for us to, as readers, to be able to critique a person's story, if you will? So when Will by Will Smith came out, this is my most memoir that I read, at least. It was very controversial, and people were picking apart all the things that he'd shared, and that's from going through, let's say, aggressive stages of his life, or trying out different therapeutic mushrooms or other kinds of drugs, right? So all kinds of things where people were like shocked to either learn about the information or felt that they were able to comment on his experiences and say, wow, like, should you really be putting these things in your memoir? Do either of you have any commentary on that?
Will Smith.
I know.
Very topical person. Yeah, I mean, like, part of me is just like, well, you put it out there for people, you know what I mean, to consume. But then, I do think that there is a responsibility on people to, not go bonkers and be hateful towards people in terms of their response. I mean, you can always, mediate that, but I mean, like, you're putting it out there on paper to read, so you can't not expect to get some commentary back about it, especially if it's maybe really out out there, I suppose.
Regardless of the intention.
Yeah, like, I mean, you're speaking to like what his intention is for telling
Yeah, like if his intention was just to share a piece of him
yeah.
to us, right? And he's up there. He's like over 50 now, so he has enough to share about that isn't just his rap career,
Sure.
his film and TV, and him going bungee jumping over the canyon or something, right?
Mhm.
So he's sharing these bits of him that I'd say are quite vulnerable
Mhm.
pieces of information. And then for us to be like, oh no, Will, that wasn't a good idea sharing this with us, right?
So for me, I think there's a layer to this that maybe we're dancing around a little bit. For him in particular, I think some of it has to do with being a potential role model for Black men.
Mhm.
And so to put out things that are and antithetical to that are challenging to that, I think that that's maybe where some folks might be pushing back, that this isn't stories that we want to tell or we want to hear as a collective from a Black person, versus, like the Matthew Perry memoir, similar kinds of content in there, and to some degree, right? Like some unflattering things about him. But he doesn't wear the mantle of a role model for all white men. So, I think that there's maybe some elements and some layers into that piece of it about what are our expectations of our celebrities? What role do they play in our lives? What do we want to hear from them? What do we want to know about them? And what are things that we would rather they keep to themselves? And that's maybe, I mean, that kind of links back to the whole Harry piece too. I don't know that I want to know some of these things about him.
It's definitely so interesting to explore this context with the two of you. We're going to wrap, but any final words, parts of this that you just want to put on the table before we exit?
My only thing would be read what you love. I read a study the other day that said that people read on average less than one book per month. And so if you think about that over a lifetime, that's not a lot of books. So read the books that you love.
That's a good thing to sit with, especially at the start of the year. Thank you both so much for coming on. This is a great conversation. All our conversations are fabulous. So I look forward to the one we have in February.
Thanks so much. Happy New Year to everyone.
Happy New Year. Theresa Power and Karen McKay of the Center for Equitable Library Access. And that's our episode for AMI Audiobook Review this week. And until the next one, happy audiobook listening.